Ladies and gentlemen, I'm very excited today to speak with a legendary person in the fencing community, Mr. Donald Anthony Jr. He's the head fencing coach at Ohio State. Donald, how are you doing today?
I'm fine. It's the Ohio State University. You got to make sure that branding's correct. It's an
Correct.
honor and a pleasure to be here with you, Brian. It
I
really is.
appreciate your time, and I appreciate the correction, the Ohio State University. So yeah, I'm excited to talk to you. There are a lot of things that you've had your hand in the fencing world here in the U.S. And we'll get into that in a little bit. But just I want to start with your background. How did you get exposed to the sport? What made you interested? We can take it from there.
All right. Well, my background, I started off as a child, as Bill Cosby would say. I was young, 7 or 8 years old, living in Cleveland, Ohio, and watching Zorro as a kid. Told my mom, "Hey, I want to learn how to do that." My mother, being the resourceful librarian that she was, realized that sword fighting and fencing, and started at an inner city cultural center called Caramel House, where they taught acting and art and dance and all of the art forms, including fencing. And my first coach was an African-American man, truly a Renaissance guy. I mean, race cars, taught water sports, archery, and fencing. And fenced until I was 11 or 12. My cousin and I started. He was way better than I was until I was about 11. Finally won a state title, and then my career stopped when I moved from Cleveland to Cincinnati. And during that period, I played all the other sports, the traditional basketball, football, ran track, spent a little time on a gymnastics team, which was probably the best thing I ever did as far as training my body. That was when I grew 6 inches and lost all of my coordination. And, even did a little tennis. But when I got ready to go to college, I knew I wanted to fence. So I narrowed it down, ended up going to Princeton, fenced there for 4 years. When I arrived, though, I had been a foil fencer. And my freshman year, my freshman class, I had a all city New York champion and a national all American. So it was sort of like, I think it might be good to change weapons. So that's when I switched to saber. Best thing I ever did. Fits my personality. Had a great career. Thought I was really done. When I graduated, I sprained my ankle in the Easterns, the IFAs, and was working in Manhattan on 42nd Street, 42nd and 3rd. Peter Westbrook worked at 42nd and 5th. We were out for lunch. Pete was like, "Yo, man, you need to come back because it's lonely in here with just me." So started again, since for 16 years on the U.S. team, made a couple of world championship teams. Peter and I became, very, very good friends. When we were getting ready to get toward the end of our competitive career, a guy named T. Shepard came to us and said, "I got a great idea for you. You guys should start a foundation." And then Pete and I were sort of like, so let me understand this. Why do we want to spend our Saturday mornings with a bunch of screaming kids? Well, we quickly understood what the benefit was. First, part of that, we started off, had 6 kids the first day, said, "No, this isn't going to work," and 100 kids the second time. So that was sort of my competitive career, and then got drafted into, the board of USA Fencing as the secretary, and said I hated that, did not want to do that at all. And then 8 years later, got drafted again, and spent 8 years as president of USA Fencing, as well as being on the executive committee of the International Fencing Federation, and now serve in that role as vice president.
Wow. Okay. So that was a whirlwind. You just took us through a lot of different steps. I want to touch on a few things. First of all, I'm a product of the Peter Westbrook Foundation, so I'm grateful for your your willingness to heed that advice from Mr. Shepard back in the day. And it's an incredible establishment in New York. But I want to talk a little bit about, were there any especially memorable moments in your competitive career, from world championships or even your college days? Anything monumental that stands out to you that you're super proud of?
I would say the thing that was probably most important in my career was in my senior year, we won the Eastern Championships and we finished fourth at the NCAAs. That was, a big step for the program and, for me personally. And I would just say that, the bonds that I formed with the three other seniors that year in my freshman, I mean, we're still fast friends, and those relationships, and that's what I try to create in my new role, an environment where those relationships can last you a lifetime. I would say on the U.S. circuit, the biggest and the first accomplishment was in the 90s when I was still, I had gone to graduate school in Philadelphia, was doing my MBA at the Wharton School, and was fencing for South Chizar. And we ended up winning the national championships. And that was the first time a team other than the New York Athletic Club or the Fencers Club had won in, I don't know, 20, 30 years. So, and at that point, I was sort of at the end of my career. And it was just really nice to see these young guys stepping up and being able to mentor and nurture them into, that accomplishment. On the individual side, I'll say that, probably one of my most memorable was, a World Cup where, was fencing some of the top Germans and, finally broke into that 64, got to that next day. And that was a time when, outside of Peter, occasionally Steve, we just were not getting those kind of results. Now it's like everyday thing, and that's what the U.S. is expected to do. But at that point in time, it was a major accomplishment, and for me personally, it was just highly significant. And then as a veteran, finishing second in the world, at the Veteran World Championship in Croatia was, my as they say, the second act of my competitive career. So those would probably be, from a individual competition standpoint. And then, now as a head coach, I would say my second season was, probably the most significant. We, swept at that time, the Midwest Fencing Conference. And I, qualified 12 athletes, had an amazing team of seniors, and was really looking forward to seeing them compete their last time, because I really was looking for some individual championships out of, titles, as well as a national title, should we be so fortunate and everybody perform. And the year before we had Oliver Schindler, my first year, when the individual NCAA champion, so those are some, as far as where we are right now, I would say those are, significant. Winning the new Central Collegiate Fencing Conference last year on the men's side, tying on the women. And then, my peers honoring me with being the men's coach of the year. That was when you're recognized by your peers, it just means so much. So those are, I'd say, the biggest competitive accomplishments.
Right. That's amazing. And I'm sure there's some footage somewhere we can find of your competition, maybe the senior circuit. Is there something out there we can look up?
There might be. I'm not sure. I don't like to look at myself fence most of the time. It's sort of like, okay, yeah, been there, done that. Let me go next. But I'm sure there's probably something out there.
Right. Well, let me ask you about this. So you mentioned kind of getting drafted into initially a secretary position with the USFA, and now being as the president there before moving into the coaching world. Can you talk a little bit about, I guess, that transition? What attracted you to the coaching position, coming from more of the corporate side on the fencing side?
So, I will say that it probably started with being secretary and part of the executive committee of the board. That was because Stacy Johnson was president, first woman president at USA Fencing. And my godfather in the sport, Chapa Poligi, is who said, look, you need to, help Stacy, you need to support her. So you need to run for secretary so you can do that. Which for me, Stacy was an amazing president. I learned a lot, and it was just a very different kind of role. And Chapa was actually also the person when I moved to Columbus for a corporate move. Charlotte Reminick was the head coach at Ohio State at the time. And he said, look, you need to go help Charlotte with her saber team. And that's sort of how I got involved with the Ohio State fencing program. Subsequently, they asked me to come in when she retired to help them find their new coach. I'm very great honor. Served was on a search committee, which Archie Griffin, the only two-time Heisman Trophy winner, was chairing, and we looked at some number of candidates, and when it came down to it, he asked me who my choice would be, and I told him it would be Vladimir Nazlimov, who's one of the best fencers and best coaches in the world. And had a chance to work with the program, and just supporting its growth, its development. And that's sort of what led to me being in this position. When Vladimir retired, they asked me to come back and help them find, their next coach, which I did. I was working with the sport AD, Carrie Hoyt, who is now my boss. And she was like, hey, Gene's in the office. He's our athletic director, Gene Smith, as I call him, the dean of athletic directors in the NCAA. Came in, and we've been friends since he first arrived. He's from Cleveland. My family has a connection. So took him out for lunch and built that relationship, came in to say hi. And he was like, well, why don't you look at the position? Why don't you take the job? And I was like, look, I'm president of USA Fencing. I'm vice president of International Federation. And, I'm not sure, and my coaching experience is really with the foundation and running programs for kids and foundation, and running stuff at the Arnold. Carrie was like, I think you can do it all. So needless to say, after me thinking that it wasn't, my wife and, the CEO of USA Fencing at the time and Greg Macialis were all like, no, this is a good thing. So that's how I ended up going from corporate consulting to here. And this is where I am today, and very happy. And really what I found out was that the skill set that I developed from my corporate practice of consulting was leadership development, building high performance teams, and organizational effectiveness. And all of those have been very transferable into this role.
That's amazing. Yeah, it definitely sounds like you're doing a lot, and you can do it all. You can manage it all, because everything is running very smoothly. So that's, yeah, kudos to you.
At least on the outside, you see that. As long as it keeps, don't let them see how the sausage is made. It's okay.
Right. Well, I guess, could you speak to that? Like, how do you find balance between such responsibilities?
The first task that I had was building, a coaching staff. And really, I have just an amazing coaching staff. I have the support of the athletic department, bar none, the best, in the country, the world, as far as, collegiate sports goes. And, with that staff, I'm able to, do the things that I needed to do during that period of time. And then I think the other thing is, having worked in the world of corporate, I mean, you just have to be very organized. I mean, one of the things I've done in an early life was, project management. And this is just sort of the kind of thing where if you have a good staff and you move and you lay out clearly what your vision is, what the expectations are, you hire great people, you put them in the positions where they can be successful, and then you get out of their way. So that's really my management philosophy. And then, it's always interesting when the stuff starts, it's funny, either in USA Fencing or within, it's like, Don, this is one you need to take care of. So that's when I have to work, and, they're good enough that that's not a constant need. So, I think the key is having great people and a great organization to work with.
Yeah. And to that point, so can you talk about how you build that culture, whether it's based on your executive experience or your experience as a coach? Your team, I'm sure, has you have a culture that you're trying to create on your team that you've been working on for the past couple of years. So can you speak to what that is in your mind, and what you do to put that in place or make that effective?
I share with my team, my clients, and anyone I speak with, I believe that the key to a successful organization starts with your leadership. And the key to being an effective leader is having a vision that you can communicate, that others can embrace, and also contribute to. And once you have that shared vision, then it's a matter of putting together a strategic plan and executing against how do you get there. And that's the process that we've used, that I've used in this position, that, my coaching staff and the team that, I'm so fortunate to have to work with. And then within that, as far as culture, open and honest communication, transparency, making sure that there's a sense of, that there's a sense of fairness. There's an understanding of, what the criteria is for success. And, and then it comes down to, how do you select those who get to represent, the organization? And, I was just recently working with them on a panel, and one of the clients, it's fair, square, and legal. So that's sort of, the same philosophy. They want, if people know that everything is fair, they know that it's what they call a square deal, where, this is mutually beneficial, and win-win is what we say in certain seconds. And then, keeping it within whatever that the NCAA rules from the standpoint of compliance. And, I think as long as we do that, that we're clear as far as what we can do, what we can't do, and then just be as supportive as possible from the standpoint of understanding that these are young people. I've had a few of them come in at 17. They're as my athlete said, they're puppies. So really helping them go from that very young age to mature, supporting them, creating an environment that's nurturing, and also which is very structured, so that they learn how to operate. So that, one of the philosophies for our athletic department is, we don't want you to just graduate. We want you to be prepared for your career, whether that's a graduate school, whether that's a corporate position, whether you're going pro or Olympics, or whatever that is. We want you to be prepared for that and have created an opportunity where you can take that next step. So that's what we do, and that's the culture we're building. And that's and then the other part of that is, when I'm looking for people for our team, we look for those who want to be part of that kind of community and that kind of family. If an athlete says, I'm just here for me, then you're probably not a good fit, because that's not what we're really looking to build. I will just say, this year we have the most amazing freshman class. I mean, it's a huge class, but the fact that these young people, they support each other, they care about each other, and they have bonded with the team that was already there. And it's just been like almost a seamless integration. And that's what you strive for, as well as just being superstar athletes.
Right. Right. That was actually going to be my next question. Obviously, Ohio State is a very competitive program, so you're looking for those top athletes that can produce results. But beyond that, I was curious to know, what qualities you look for in your incoming recruits. So that's what you just basically said, team players, people who are willing to buy into the system and buy into the philosophy, the culture that you're building. So that's great to know.
Sure. And, we look for people who are just really decent, caring human beings, as well as great athletes. And then, and not everybody comes in, as a superstar, and not everybody's going to be a superstar, but we look for people who are willing to put in the work to get to be the best that they possibly can be. And if you're willing to do that, I mean, we have a young lady on our team. She was a walk-on last year. We were really down on our numbers for women's foil. So she was a competitive swimmer. One of our, one of her classmates said, hey, she's interested. So she has not even been fencing a year. She's fenced competitively. I think her record's 4-2. And, as I constantly remind her when she's fencing against people who've been fencing 8 or 9 years, hey, look, next week, we're sort of joking. We're bringing in a cake to celebrate her 1-year anniversary as a fencer. But, I mean, the fortunate thing is she's got Elvis Gregory, one of the greatest fencers, and an amazing coach to work with. And the level that she competes at this time, because of her work ethic, because of her passion for the sport, when we were doing our introductions this year, it was sort of funny. Everybody had gone, I've been fencing 6 years, I've been on world teams, I've accomplished this. She said, well, I'm a little different. I haven't been fencing a year yet. And one of the questions is, why do you fence? She said, because I think it's a dope sport. So, I mean, those are the kinds of young people that we're looking for. We want those superstar elites. We have a young man, our recruit in men's epee where, he's number 6 junior in the world last season, or pre-COVID. So, and then we have these babies and they all mesh. And that's really what we're trying to get, build that group so that everybody has a place, everybody's cared for, and everybody knows that they want to be there and they know we want them to be there.
Yeah, that's amazing. And it's clear that you're building a winning culture because we can see the fruit from it. We can see the results. So, congratulations on all the success up to this point, and we're looking forward to seeing more.
We got a lot further to go. We got a long way to go.
Yes, sir. I want to zoom out just a little bit and ask you about some of your work outside of coaching. I know your project Sword Sport is a big endeavor. I wanted to learn more about that from your perspective, kind of where you're looking to go with that, what's going on currently.
Well, currently, I will say these last 3 years has been somewhat of a hiatus, just because of the demands of everything else I was doing. There just really wasn't a lot of bandwidth for that. But going forward, the premise of Sword Sport was really taking fencing and making it a sports property, a marketable sports property, and really taking it from what I would say our sport has typically been doing fencing for fencers and doing it for a wider audience and creating the same kinds of content and collateral around fencing that you see with other sports. And I will say that since I started, that company in 2000, 21 years later, the sport has come a long way. I mean, if you just look at the property that the International Federation has created around the Grand Prix events, that is the production at the highest level. And one of the things so I had this concept when we were in a national championship in some high school gym in New Jersey. Peter Westbrook and a bunch of Olympians were competing, and I'm like, there's something missing here. No audience, no coverage, and nobody who even cared. And now we at least have gone from good venues, good presentation, the production value is there. Now my goal now is to figure out what Sword Sport 2.0 looks like. We have so many things going on. How do we take it to the next level? How do we work with the International Federation? How do we work with the great university programs like OSU and Northwestern and Notre Dame that have, Columbia? All of them have really good social media right now. How do we take what the content they're creating? How do we put it together so that we continue to build these kinds of sports properties and ultimately create an opportunity where our top athletes are able to generate an income, post-collegiate competition?
Yeah, I love that. I couldn't agree more. I think there's so much potential for where fencing can, where fencing can go as a sport. In terms of media that's available, the properties that are available around it, how the athletes can be marketed, things like that. So I'm really excited to see kind of what the future holds. Are there any ideas or things that you see forthcoming in the future that you would want to share at this point, where you'd like to see the sport go?
I don't have any particular ideas that I want to share. Some of my partners might consider it proprietary, intellectual property. But I think the general idea from my standpoint is we have a amazing sport. I was in a meeting with our athletic director recently, and on Ohio State's campus, the Ohio State fencing team is one of the most diverse teams of all sports teams, and that's also what our sport now looks like. There was a time, as when Peter was saying, "Hey, it's lonely because there's really nobody else that looks like me doing this at this level at this point in time." In my weapon, we had good representation in foil, but in saber it had been sort of a little bit of a desert. But now if you look across the scope of both domestically with the National USA Fencing Tournament, and then if you look at internationally, when you look at an Olympic game, the representation of how many people and how diverse our sport is, this is the message. And then I think the other thing is, one, how do we get more visibility in mainstream media? How do we do a better job of covering our sport in the channels that we do have available? And, there's, without a focused campaign, there's only so much content that can be created, and without the campaign and then also the capital support to make that happen.
Yeah, agreed. Well, again, I'm excited to see what the future holds as far as that goes. And also for you specifically, with the team, much success to you this season. When does the season officially kick off for you?
We have our first competition tomorrow.
Okay.
We have individuals. It's a open competition actually for the OSU individual, but then our first dual meet is on Sunday, our first dual meet. So we're looking forward to it. And, it's a great opportunity for many of our freshmen. Most of our freshmen some of them have never even seen what a collegiate dual meet competition looks like, let alone competed in one. So this is a good opportunity to introduce them to a world that they're going to be in for the next 4. And it's sort of interesting with the COVID extra year, many of our athletes are getting, the 5-year plan. So.
Yeah. Quite an interesting year last year. I didn't ask about that, but how was it navigating that with your team and with your staff?
It was challenging to say the least. We weren't even back on campus until this time last year. In October, we came back around the 3rd or the 4th. And, I would say that it was sort of a double-edged sword. We were like, yes, we get back into the gym. And then it was like, okay, how are we going to make this work with the COVID protocols, with the size of our team, being able to bring it in. So, we ended up having to really train by weapon group because we couldn't have everybody in. So we had to stagger. We had to set up socially distanced seating. There were no locker rooms available. It was interesting. And then I just want to, really acknowledge my fellow coaches because they looked and say, okay, how are we going to have a season? What can we do to make this happen? And I had Zach Moss reach out to us. I had, Gia. I had Wes Glahn at Penn State. I mean, all of these coaches were like, okay, can you host a competition? Can you host a competition because you are the most centrally located and all of us can get there with the COVID protocols of no flying. So everybody had to bus. And we were able to do that in February. And, it was successful from the standpoint of, one, demonstrating that we could host a safe competition in the midst of COVID. There were no cases after our competition. And it showed that we can continue to do this so that we were able to have, a NCAA championship. And that was really critical. Similar to what I would say as far as the Olympics, the athletes really need to be able to compete. We missed that NCAA's the year before, and we needed to make sure that was possible. So it was challenging. We had some people who did not come back. They weren't on campus. We missed the Ivies. They weren't competing. But it was something that we were able to navigate, and we were able to get it done. And I think that we're very happy that this season is starting off in a little different environment.
Yes, there's a lot of excitement coming into this season. So again, wishing you the best personally, wishing the team much success this year. We'll definitely stay tuned and stay in touch to see what's going on as the season progresses. But again, just thank you, Donald, for your service and for your contributions to the sport. And looking forward to seeing what comes in the future, like you said, with Source Sport 2.0 and beyond. So again, thank you for your time. I really appreciate it.
Well, my pleasure. It's an honor. It's a pleasure. And thank you for what you're doing and your initiative. I mean, what you're doing is part of, how do we get the messaging out? How do we get the visibility, more perspectives on what's going on in this sport, and, and highlighting the great activities that are happening at the collegiate level. So keep up the great work. And it's been an honor and a pleasure to be part of the D1 fencing interview.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. I appreciate it. We'll talk soon.
All right. Looking forward to it.
All right.